Alright, this is the flight deck of the Antonov AN-225 Mriya, which is Dream in Ukrainian, world's largest cargo transport aircraft and pretty much the largest operational aircraft, only really beat in wingspan by the huge H-4 Hercules. The plane was sadly lost during the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine in the Battle of Antonov Airfield, as this aircraft, which was originally designed for the Soviet space program to carry the Buran orbiter and the Energia booster rockets, but was later operated by Antonov Airlines as an international cargo transport aircraft. But the aircraft is no more. It was very badly damaged during the invasion, and they might build another one. It's not going to look like this. There is pretty much a half completed airframe in existence somewhere near Kiev, I believe, but we'll get around to it when this war is won. But the cockpit is likely going to be a modernized glass cockpit and not this kind of Soviet style cockpit with lots and lots of buttons. But yeah, the aircraft is absolutely massive in size, and this is the Antonov livery for it, with an additional slogan in the front, and it says Mriya on the side. So let's start firing this baby up now. It's going to be a very lengthy process, but we can do it. As any pilot or mechanic knows, you just trust the checklist and everything will be fine. Now, the first order of business on any startup is to get some electricity going, and we are going to be firing up the battery switches in the back here, and that will light us our panels and get the juices flowing in the aircraft. Now, you can also use this switch to turn on ground power generation, but we don't have a ground power unit connected, so we are going to pretty much straight up proceed with the APU start. And since this is a very big aircraft with 6 engines, it actually needs 2 APUs for the startup process. So we're gonna hop onto that panel next. And here we are at the APU control panel. Now, on most modern aircraft you just hit APU start, but not on the Antonov, because this is a very old aircraft. So we're gonna have to do the sequence, and everything is in Cyrillic, so I really have to just learn how to do this by heart. This switch, I believe, is the fuel heater, which must be off. This is the bleed air, this is the fire loop, and this is our master switch, and this is our starter. And if everything is done correctly, the RPM needle here should begin to move. There is 2 needles here, and there we go. That is APU 1 beginning its startup sequence. Now you're supposed to wait for the APU to fire up and then follow it up with APU number 2. The sequence is exactly the same. Speed up. And there we go. Now it's firing up. So yeah, everything being in Cyrillic makes it a little bit annoying to work with and remember all of this, but just have to learn it by heart, basically. Now that the APUs are running, we will come back to this panel with the battery switches, and we can check the APU generation over here. So both of these are generating power, and we are therefore good to move on to the next phase. Now we will turn on the power rectifiers on this panel. Over here we have the instrumentation and navigation master switches, which is a lot of switches, and all of these must be turned on. And this is, well, all of our navigation and other instruments that require electricity. And yeah, a lot of switches. Now the cockpit and the flight deck are pretty much ready. We've got power. There are some warnings flashing on the board. But we can now move on to the next phase, which is fuel and hydraulics. First order of business is to make sure that our fuel switches are set to rich. And those are these switches down here, and there's 6, one for each engine. And they are good, so we'll move on to the hydraulics panel. There's not much for us to do at the hydraulics control panel except to check that the hydraulics pump switches are set to off, and then go to the fuel panel and check that all of our fuel switches are in their correct positions, which they are by default. Now, as always, before engine start, you switch on the beacon light, and that is to warn the hypothetical ground crew that the engines are about to start. And now we can move on to the starter panel. Now, to begin the engine auto start sequence, we will open the starter panel, and here we have starter mode switches and mixture switches. We will set this to auto start mode. We will check our FADEC system up here. That is an engine control unit. And then we will hold the start button down until we get green lights. And now the engine start process is going to begin. And we are already seeing N1 rising up here on engine number 1. And hopefully these lights should go off as the engines spin up. And the engines will begin, not necessarily in a sequential order, but we're seeing engines firing up now. So that is the fairly lengthy, but once you kind of do it a couple of times, you will eventually figure it out, kind of a startup